Congressman, you were the only Democrat to flip a House seat in 2020. Do you think you would have been able to win if SB 202 was in place before your election?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And I do, but it would have been a lot more challenging. And what they're doing is they are trying to shut down and restrict voting. And right now with this bill, they're really heavily targeting the absentee ballot voting. Actually, in 2018, I litigated for weeks after my election around issues exactly like the ones that they're putting in this bill. There were provisions where they required you to put a birth date next to your signature, and if you put today's date instead of your birth date, your ballot would have been thrown out. If you didn't fill out your address correctly, your ballot was thrown out. And that's what they're reinstituting with this law.
In terms of ordinary voters, do you get the sense on the ground that your constituents are upset about this law? Are they aware of this law? Do they know that these changes have been put into place as of last night?
Absolutely. And people are furious. On social media, our phones are ringing off the hook. People are very angry about this. And I do think it's going to inspire people to turn out and to fight harder.
What do you think this law means for other Democrats who want to run for office and follow in your footsteps and Congressman Williams' footsteps? Is this now just a new barrier for unorthodox candidates who, aren't normally in elected office to even step forward and run?
Right. Yes, absolutely it is. It does make it harder. And in Georgia, we're always fighting against a playing field as Democrats that is tilted against us. And people of color in particular are very much targeted by these pieces of legislation. They are making it harder for people to vote. They're creating more barriers that you have to jump over. Again, just to go back to that 2018 race, they were throwing out ballots for, minor clerical errors, little problems, and they throw that out, oddly enough, in Gwinnett County, which is very diverse and Democratic. But in Forsyth County, they didn't throw it out, or they would call the voters and tell them to come correct their ballot so that it could be counted. And those kinds of discrepancies were the things that we pointed out. Fair Fight picked it up and expanded it statewide. And that's what led to the really successful turnout. The successful turnout where there was no evidence of fraud or problems that happened in 2020. And we need to go back to that so that we can have free and fair elections. That's all we ask.
Is there any rational explanation for this law? Is there any argument that you've heard from Republicans who have proposed and now passed this law that is rational, based in fact, or is it all based on the big lie?
As far as I can tell, it is based on the big lie. And I know several of your clips earlier really covered that. Basically, what they've done is they lost an election. They've lied about voter fraud affecting that election. It did not. The votes in Georgia were counted 2 times. Three times actually. Once for the regular time. Then they went back, they did a hand recount of 5 million votes. Then they went back and they counted the ballots again. No evidence of problems or serious irregularities. They went back and they counted 15,000 signatures to see if there were any problems with signatures or absentee ballots that had been submitted illegally. No evidence of problems. This entire process was overseen by Republicans who supported Trump in the election. So if they could have found something, they would have. So after all of this, they continued to assert that there was voter fraud, even though there was no evidence of it. And now they've introduced legislation on that basis. So yes, it is grounded in a lie.
Any chances backfires on them, though, with regular voters?
I think people are pretty mad. And some of the pictures you're showing of people standing in the long lines, I recognize those precincts because they're in the 7th district. And when we voted in early vote around the November 3rd election, sometimes people waited in line for 12 hours. And I have to say the voters in my district have gotten pretty steely and pretty determined about voting. And I think this will double their determination to make sure that their vote is taken and their vote is counted.
When somebody tries to take something away from you that is your right, it does make you very motivated to be able to participate in that election. When people are like, you can't do it, I'm like, Who says who? I'm old enough and I have the right to vote. I've read the Constitution. Congressman Carolyn Bourdeaux, thank you so much for being here, and please stay safe.